this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, come back to you with another video. And in this video, I have Olun Riley. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah.
Can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name is Olun Riley. I'm a lighting supervisor at the Walt Disney Animation Studios. Currently working on a feature project coming up called Moana 2. I won't be supervising on that, but I'll be on the next one. And just wanted to say thank you for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here.
It's awesome to have you. So, you're from Cascade, Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. How was it growing up? What is your origin story?
My origin story. Wow. Okay. So my family, basically, they grew up in the South. My mom's from the north of Trinidad. And when I say South, I mean south of Trinidad and Tobago. I know South means a different thing in the States. My dad's family's from the South and of Trinidad, and basically they met in the North, and they were the children of what I would call the generation that were the nation builders, because that was around the time of sort of like their lifespan encompasses sort of like the development of the country as it became independent. So they sort of branched the two states of the colony, which was once a British colony and then an independent nation. So my grandparents were sort of like coming from more agricultural roots, and then my parents were from more professional, like engineers, lawyers, doctors, roots, because their parents were very high on education and having their kids become sort of like parts of the nation in its sort of like independence. And so we're sort of like the next generation of that, growing up and watching all of this. We were post-independence when my life never saw the world before that, and so I sort of kind of saw the world in a kind of a much, I would say at the time, a much more positive light, because we were moving out of one state. So you hear the stories from your grandparents, and then you're sort of like seeing the possibilities for the future. Everybody was sort of letting their kids become whatever they wanted to be. So there was nothing sort of like holding them back. So at the same time, though, there was a lot of like wanting to be like, because we were a British colony, there was a lot of wanting to prove ourselves to be even better than the British, like doing what they do, but doing it even better. And so there was a lot of pressure, a lot of like having to do really well in school and that sort of thing, and really coming up. So with all of that kind of going on, my childhood was kind of watching a lot of that and sort of questioning it, like not taking it at face value. And I was sort of fortunate enough that my parents weren't too bought into it to the point where it would have been debilitating to me. It was like, yes, you better, do your best, but it's not at the sort of detriment to your own personality and your own sort of like development and growth in the world and understanding your place in the world. So they really wanted to foster your ability to sort of like see the world for what it is and find your way through it, and give you the tools and resources you need to sort of like find your way. At the same time, I was sort of like influenced heavily by a lot of television and comic books and a lot of external factors to my own culture. So as much as I was enjoying my local culture, I was also exposed heavily to external factors, and television being one of the big ones. And so there was a lot of pressure to avoid television, stay away from it, go outside and play, that sort of thing, which we did. We had a lot of fun outdoors, and my mom instilled a lot of like appreciation for nature, and she would take us on country drives, and we would go to the beach a lot and stuff like that. So and then she got that from her mom too, like just sort of an appreciation for nature and being outdoors. So I kind of had these two sort of worlds in my head, sort of like looking at the outside world beyond our shores and what was going on out there, and then me locally in Trinidad, sort of growing up, trying to reconcile those two things. And from that, I used to draw a lot. Like I drew heavily. Like I had a pencil in my hand and paper. Those were the two things I always like look for in the morning when I get up.
Yeah.
And I was just constantly drawing. And I think I think from that, I think when I started seeing my first cartoons on TV, it was kind of like I was trying to figure out like how is it that these like I kind of didn't think that they were I didn't think that they were real, but I was like, how is it that these drawings are alive? Like, I was trying
Yeah.
to understand what was happening there, and um, and so I kind of looked into it a bit more and found out that people actually there are people who draw these drawings that
Mhm.
are able to move, and with that I got fascinated with like the movie sort of the idea of filmmaking in movies and the motion picture and all that. So and of course television was a way into it because it kind of cued me into motion pictures a lot, right?
Right.
Um, so from a very young age I kind of was like that's what I wanted to do. Like I wanted to learn how to make my drawings come to life. Like that was like the thing that propelled me into this business. um so by that, when I saw my parents took me to see Pinocchio at the theater, and it just blew my mind, like
Mhm.
how much that the beauty, the artistry of what I was seeing was just sort of I just wanted to be a part of that. Like I didn't know what it was, but I just knew I wanted to be a part of that. That's what I wanted to do. And that took me in a weird place because there was nothing in my environment that remotely even could connect me to that in any way, other than maybe our carnival, because that was like the biggest celebration every year that was heavily visual and audio, like music and culture, and there's all this stuff going on.
Like the
um,
Fantasia.
yeah, exactly. And so there was this other aspect that I was like, okay, so but I couldn't get like how that could connect me to what I was doing,
Yeah.
because that was very much in the moment and present, and it was always almost like a one time of the year thing, and I didn't really have much insight to all the stuff that went on behind the scenes of that, to know where I would have even been able to slot myself into, like, could I do the drawings or whatever, like where could I fit in there.
Right.
So I didn't really have much insight into that. But I knew it was there. I knew there was something there. But my personal life, like going to school,
Mhm.
I had friends who had comic books, and we would share comic books. I used to like Richie Rich a lot, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say it now, but he was kind of like my favorite comic book at the time, because what he sort of presented, even though now I have certain ideas about that whole culture,
Right.
is that what I liked about Richie was a young kid who had all the resources available to him.
Mhm.
Like he had money, and he could go anywhere, he could do anything with his money. And so he took his friends on trips, he would go out and have adventures, and you do whatever. And it really appealed to me from that standpoint. So I kind of lived through Richie Rich. I kind of lived my best dreams like through that. So I buy a lot of comic books and read about him, but I also drew him a lot, and so I would draw my own comic books and have him do things I wanted to do, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so
It
that was
exposed you to the idea that the resources were existed.
yeah. The things that you could just do. So I kind of, in a way, it kind of set me up for a lot of disappointment, because because the world was not gonna be like
Right.
and I kind of had this notion in my head that I'd become this, like, although I mean I could say that, what's wrong with having that dream, but
Yeah.
becoming this sort of what nowadays you have as a mogul, and people who just like run an empire, right? That's all the rage now, right? Everybody sort of builds
Right.
their little mini empire, and it was that kind of idea that was kind of mulling about in my head. It's like that I was gonna, like, trying to be like Walt and have, like, theme parks and other businesses and all this kind of stuff. And so it sort of was, that was the whole thing. But my main thing, though, is that I really enjoyed animation, and the other stuff was just sort of like me parroting like what someone had done before, right? Like I was
Yeah.
listening to it. seeing that as like, oh well, I guess I'll get into animation and then I'll be building theme parks, and that just all par for the course, right? That it's not exactly how things turned out, but it's sort of like I've come to learn a lot about life in the process, and I'm good for it. So I'm okay,
Because like ignorance is bliss, and knowledge kind of keeps you from things. So if you knew certain things, then you wouldn't have had your journey.
Yeah, yeah, in a way, yeah, that sounds about right. Um, so a lot of it was I think I knew from a very early age that I was going to be living in California because I knew that's where Hollywood was and
Yeah.
all this stuff was. I did not pursue directly going to California. I just sort of had in my head that I will end up there someday. Like that's kind of how I was. And so a lot of decisions that I made from a very early age was in sort of like, how would that reality happen for me? So when it came to like I said, everything was not talking animation to me at all in my world, and so I kind of was looking at like in I think junior high school level studies. I was like looking at my roster of classes and saying, okay, which one of these will get me towards my goal?
Right.
And a lot of my education was early on in a lot of sort of math and science heavy, with some languages thrown in, but art wasn't one of them. And the schools didn't really push art a lot, at least where the schools I went to.
Right.
And so what ended up happening, there was this weird thing where because you did so many classes of a certain type, they were sort of aiming you into a certain track. Like, so all the math and science, they thought maybe engineer, medical doctor, blah, blah, blah. And so when the time came for me to do my, the end of high school, what they call O levels for us, they were actually not going to have me do art. And my mom, who's a teacher, did not, she basically had to go into the school and sort of fight for me to be able to do art as a class, because the school was saying,
love our educator parents.
She was my advocate, because she was like, this is ridiculous. You have this kid who draws like all the time, and you're telling him he cannot do art in his educational studies. And I was fortunate enough, there was an artist, a well-known artist from back home named Jackie Hinkson, who was a teacher at the school I went to. It's Queens Royal College in Trinidad. And he basically saw this problem that was set up in the school, was very much disappointed in that process, and offered to teach outside of the normal school hours his art class. And so they treated it more like an extracurricular. And my mom was saying to me, okay, are you okay taking on this as an extra class? Because I could not replace a class. I had to take all my classes during class time. But are you okay with taking the extra class? Because you'll still get the O level for art, but you will be taking this class outside of your regular hours. And I agreed to that, and I was able to do the O level art class. So
Nice.
So that was kind of like my early childhood. A lot of it too was, I also had a lot of because my parents, especially my grandfather, he also taught at the same school, Queens Royal College, and he had a lot of influence in a lot of the sort of like developmental, like the people who were going to become ministers and leaders in the country because of him being a teacher. He was a geologist by as far as his own sort of personal expertise. And one of the leading, he was actually one of the only qualified geologists in the Caribbean region that were locally grown. And at the time, so he had a lot of influence and a lot of sort of connections with people. And from that, like I think a lot of our circles tended to have a lot of people that were well known in the society. So those folks would sort of like visit our house, and we would go to functions and see them there, and that sort of thing. And so a lot of folks a lot of times in my young life, I would run into a lot of people who were pretty much like well known in our culture. And so so I had an exposure that allowed me to sort of see possibilities, right, for where I could find myself in the future, at the highest level, at least of what was in front of me. It gave me, I think my early childhood gave me a lot of exposure to a lot of stuff that I think a lot of people don't normally get, but
Yeah.
it was also too, because it was an island, it's almost like being in a small town. You have certain access, even for small towns that have big figures. Those big figures are accessible to those small town folks,
Yeah.
because they know them, they grew up with them, and so they find themselves in spaces that they can have opportunities to meet them and stuff. So yeah. So I had it was I would say it's interesting childhood, but it was like I was kind of like, on the one hand, there was a lot of good stuff, and there was not some not so good stuff, which I'll get into later. But yeah.
So, what are some of your best childhood memories?
I think it's to do with a lot of like my going around the country with my parents. A lot of those drives. We as kids, we didn't really like we would like the drives were nice in the sense that they were on a Sunday. You didn't have school. You would just go on, and we sort of come to expect doing those sort of things. And my dad would be going to visit friends of his in the country and visit places that my mom and dad knew. Those were good because it was sort of family bonding moments. It was just my three brothers and myself that were out there, just driving along, and stopping, getting food, and going to the beach and that sort of thing. So I really relish those moments that we had as growing up. And then the other side of it was that I played a lot in my backyard with our toys. Whatever we got for Christmas, we would go out in the backyard because that was our movie set. It's for the adventures these toys would go on. So yeah, we just ate up every inch of the property to find spaces in which to have these adventures. So the shed in the backyard, or the little river that sort of like goes alongside our house. It's sort of, yeah, we find places to take our Legos and our Star Wars toys and $6 Million Man figurines, out there, and just have a blast.
Nice. What is your cultural makeup? That's not only to say what's your ethnicity, but like what is the culture of where you grew up and the uniqueness of where you're from, particularly as compared to America.
Well, Trinidad is an interesting nexus. It brings a lot of cultures from around the world in one small space, and there's a lot of history connecting how those cultures ended up there, and then with that, there's a sort of melting pot vibrancy to it, of these cultures. We have folks that between the Africans and the East Indians that make up most of the population of the country. We also have Syrians, Chinese, some Jewish people as well. It's sort of like they sort of, because we were a British colony, and the British kind of went all over the planet doing all kinds of stuff. And things happen in trade and people moving about.
Yes.
and I'm totally like glossing over these details there, but and then there were the people who actually were living there before, right? That are there. Some of them are still there in gene pools, but as far as culturally, I don't know that there's many practicing. I think there's a few communities in the south or the central of Trinidad that have that try to retain some of that culture between the Taino peoples and sort of like the local native Caribbean people. And in fact, I found out that my grandmother was quarter Carib. So I'm 132. So that's as much as I connect to the locality. But Yeah, there was it was I mean, growing up, it was learning about like how we all got there and how it all came to be, with all the European history that sort of like has, created all those tumultuous aspects of the island. Um, I would say the thing that makes it unique for us is how, in spite of all of that, the people have this sort of very positive, vibrant spirit that sort of like can deal with a lot,
Mhm.
you know. And it's not to say that
Still
they're,
and steel pan. It's
yeah, when you talk about like the steel pan and how that was created, and it's like the oil drums from the oil industry that was forming up at the time in 19th century, Trinidad. And these guys here was the thing. There was a thing about like the African people not being allowed to express their culture, right?
yeah,
And so they couldn't beat drums, but they could. But the thing is, they were finding other things to hit. So it's like,
right,
well, they're not beating drums; they're beating these other things. You said you couldn't beat drums anymore. Okay, well, we're beating
right,
drums, and those things don't sound like drums, right? So
right.
so they were always finding ways around that,
Yes,
that thing, and I think even the way carnival was born, it was sort of like it was almost like a revolution, in a quiet revolution in a way, to the nonsense that was happening with the racial Europeans that were there. In a way, if you think of it, carnival was a European, originally a European thing, like in Venice, they all dress up in
yeah,
harlequins and all that kind of stuff. But they were doing that celebration, they were expressing that themselves in their houses, and there. But the carnival that we know about, was in sort of like a response to that, in that while they were celebrating in their houses, the African peoples were outside celebrating in their own way, and in many ways they were actually mocking those folks in the houses, and they
yeah.
would, in a sense, put on their makeshift costumes in mockery to them.
Man,
And
if anything, if an African diaspora ain't gonna do anything, we gonna mock them.
yeah.
Have you ever heard of the cakewalk? That for Black Americans.
No, the cakewalk.
The cakewalk is like it's kind of funny because it's a dance that Black Americans did to make fun of the master, but then
Uh-huh.
white people started doing it in vaudeville. So it's like they didn't know that we were making fun of them, but then they started doing it as an entertainment.
Ah, okay, so I may have heard of the cakewalk to hear of it. I didn't know what it was. So
Yeah.
there was a cakewalk dance you're saying that was originally intended to be a mockery that
Of
they took on. That's hilarious.
it's like we kept. It's like we dispersed, but we're like we're gonna make fun of these people.
Yeah,
That's what I love
yeah.
about hearing about different people in the diaspora. Like, we have our differences, but the things that are
There's
similar
something
are so
there's
funny.
something that we all kind of like, yeah. There is an African. I gotta find that again, because I remember hearing about this African tribe somewhere sort of like near South Africa, just a little north of it. That has the tribe has a particular culture of like not letting people sort of like get up in their heads about stuff, like making themselves like puffy and all
Yeah.
that. So there's a constant, like, almost like if you could say it's a tribe of roasting. Like, the tribe never allows you to get beyond your rich,
Right.
so there's always this like element of, you can be brought down a peg. Don't worry about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That's so funny.
I think in the end, the dressing up and the mockery and all that kind of stuff kind of translated its way into the culture through music, and also through performance and demonstration. And when you think of the Calypsonians and stuff, they were sort of speaking truth to power in a lot of their songs. Like, the songs may not sound like they're doing that, but if you actually paid attention, or the people who were listening to the songs knew exactly what the songs were talking about.
Right.
Whereas someone not really aware of that will think it's just a love story between two people. you know. um, uh, so a lot of that was happening. There was this, like, I remember as a kid, and I don't see too much of it anymore. It's something I kind of miss, was that we had this thing called Old Mass, and it's kind of spelled OLE,
Mhm.
old, like Old Mass. And what that was you could join in a band with whatever makeshift costume you could put together. Like and so in many ways you could, and a lot of times people would just make placards and tell jokes and dress up and do little performances, or play their favorite carnival characters and stuff.
Yeah.
And what I really enjoyed about that, compared to sort of like the what we call the pretty mass, which is what you see with people wearing beads and feathers, and then also dressing up in the most expensive costumes they could find. Um, what I liked about it was that the old mass was created by the regular folks who just had something to say,
Yeah.
and felt like, and so we kind of we kind of relished in watching that on television, because all the jokes were there, like all the jokes, all the tea that's being spilled about what people were saying about certain politicians and their behavior and what went on during the year. It was a really like it was just sort of people were just letting go and just like telling it as it is as they see it.
Nice.
And so I kind of missed that, and I wish we had a way of kind of bringing some of that back,
Yeah.
because it wasn't a lot of like money involved in that sense. It was just people just being people and having a good time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something I kind of miss from what I see in Carnival today. And it
Yeah.
allowed for people to just be creative, and I think if you were to sort of like reboot it today, you would see a
Mhm.
lot more creative stuff, I think, because there's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff that's going on that I'm sure people are dealing with.
Yeah.
Mm.
It sounds like because I moved. I'm from Detroit, but like I moved to LA from New Orleans, and
Hmm.
so Pretty Mass sounds like Mardi Gras, and then Old
Hmm.
Mass kind of is reminiscent to me. Like there are elements of maybe the Old Mass thing in Mardi Gras, but there's a different uh, parade called Crew de Vue,
Uh-huh.
which happens in I think October. Yeah,
Hmm.
I don't think it happens during Mardi Gras, but it's like more political, and so whatever's going
Hmm.
on in the world, people are creating like floats and stuff like that around what's
Yeah,
happening, and
that
so there's
does
always
sound
a
like it.
theme. Yeah,
Yeah, that does sounds on that. Well, how do you say that? What you
Crew de
call it
Vue.
again? Kudevo?
Yeah,
Cool. Yeah, I'll look that up.
yeah. I was
Great.
gonna ask if you've ever been to Mardi Gras.
In New Orleans,
Hmm.
I have been to New Orleans, but not during Mardi Gras.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think people a lot of times think they think a lot of things about Mardi Gras that's inaccurate, but that's
Hmm.
because people kind of go to New Orleans for debauchery, and then that's what you find. But
Yeah.
but like it's like 2 weeks of parades as opposed to like one day, and
Hmm.
then it's a very family oriented event,
Mm.
unless you go to where the debauchery is. But
Well,
like
well, oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
It's for us it's like, yes, there's the 2 days, the Monday and Tuesday. We have the
yeah,
big celebration of the costumes and the bands,
mhm,
and a lot of debauchery. And and but leading up to those 2 days, there's actually a lot of cultural festivities, like
yeah,
the steel pan, the calypso competitions.
mhm,
There's a lot of a lot of the food, and sort of like there are tents you can go to and listen to music, and it's just like there's all this whole buildup
yeah,
that leads up to those 2 days, and actually, like I always tell people, like, don't just go for the 2 days, go for like the week before and
yeah,
enjoy being there for all
yeah,
this celebration as they anticipate the big
right,
day. Yeah.
yeah. In what ways, you did kind of talk about it a little bit, but in what ways were your parents and even maybe your grandparents supportive of your artistic journey?
um mostly supportive. I would say, again, the sort of like everybody being sort of like being pushed to sort of like be their best self kind of thing. um there was, I mean, I made it sound like there wasn't a push on art, but music and art. My grandmother was a musician. She played piano, and I also have an uncle who on my mom's side, who was an actor, who performed for stage plays and stuff, and was like one of the main actors for Derek Walcott. Trinidad Theater Workshop was the
Hmm.
workshop that he was a part of. And funny enough, I found out when I went to the National African American History Museum, I actually managed to find a little blurb in the corner of in the art section that talked about Paul Robeson coming down and opening the theater, Trinidad Theater, the Little Carib Theater, sorry, the Little Carib Theater in Trinidad, which was one of the theaters that they performed in a lot. The Trinidad Theater
Nice.
Workshop performed in a lot, so there was a lot of history and connection there, um, and I thought that was. And so he was a well-known actor back home, and growing up, it's kind of funny. I knew him. I knew he was that way, but then as being his nephew in the house, he had his place in the house, and it
Right.
was like, you don't go touch his stuff. You just, let him. He's like, that's his area. This is where we live, and that he lives over there, and you don't.
Right.
So when he's home, we can go over there and say hi. But if he's not there, you are not to go in there and be messing around with his stuff, right?
Right. Yeah.
um, but he was a lovely man. Like I just his he had a what I really respected about him was that he never laid a hand on us,
Hmm.
but he had a way, and it's probably because being an actor, he can project with his voice.
Yeah.
uh, he can project terror without having to supply any sort of physical harm, and and so his booming voice, whenever he would like call your name or whatever, if he was upset, it's like you did not want to upset this man.
Right.
He was a very serious individual,
Hmm.
but he had a part of him that you can tell it was coming from a really good place, and that he
Hmm.
cared. Like you
Yeah.
felt the love, you felt the care, and so you
Hmm.
didn't really feel like he was, somebody you need to really mess with, because he was pretty sincere and authentic.
Yeah.
Um, and so you took him at his word. Whatever he said, he's like, okay, that's what it is. That's what it is. That's the
Right.
law. So just and you're fine. And it was great growing up and becoming an adult, knowing him, because he just became a great friend down the
Yeah.
road. Like it just, I would. There's a thing, actors, they like to drink after the play and all this kind of stuff. And
Right.
I actually, fortunately, was able to actually be in a play with him
Oh,
once.
nice.
Yeah, I got hired on. I mean, there's a little tiny part. I just had to laugh on stage, but
Right.
I was in a play with him performing as one of the leads, and then so and all the other actors that were there, and it was a great experience. I really enjoyed that experience, and um, but so one of the times later on, he was well retired by this point. When he likes to have his Scotch whiskey, Johnny Walker Black, so he likes to do that.
Yeah.
But then every once in a while, some friends would come along and give him a Johnny Walker Blue, and he'd have it sitting there in the closet, and be like, when I come home for Christmas, he would kind of like, want to try some blue? It's like, sure,
Nice.
and so here I am. I was not a big. I mean, I drank, but I was not know anything about alcohol and all
Yeah.
that. So I said, one time I said, oh, I'm gonna buy him a blue for Christmas. I didn't even think about it. I just thought, oh, how much can that be? And then I saw the price.
Right.
Like, jeez.
Oh, it's a thought that counts, and I'm just gonna think about it.
Well, that Christmas I didn't get him one, but I
Right.
saved up money for the next one and got him one
Yeah.
the next Christmas, because I
You're like, oh, this is an investment.
yeah, you got to put some money aside for this one. My dad he was a prolific reader, and he had a huge library in the house, and a lot of books, but mostly about like philosophy, and stories of different cultures and religions and that sort of thing. And um, so it was a great sort of resource to kind of like, I would just kind of walk through, pick a book and read it and stuff, and see what he's about.
Hmm.
A lot of it was very heady and way over my head, but he did have a few interesting tidbits in there. He didn't really have a lot of context and a lot of places to like have me explore and to figure out how I can actually get from point A to point B. But he also had a really good friend who had a bookstore, and that many times after school, when he would pick us up, he would take us over to the bookstore, and that'd be
Hmm.
another opportunity to kind of like poke around and see what they had. And his friend had a lot of these like magazines, for like Starlog, which was about science fiction movies and books and stuff like that. And that's where the Richie Rich comics also showed up.
Okay.
Um, so there was a sort of like a familial friendship and a relationship with sort of like reading and books in the family because of that. My mom would bribe me to actually like do better in my studies, because if I did well in school, she was gonna take me to the store and she'd say, have at it at the comic books. You can just pick what you want.
Oh,
So
nice.
that was kind of like that was kind of fun. But my dad was he, as a father, as a kid, he was very much like, he's very erudite. Like he was a civil engineer.
Mm-hmm.
He ran his own design and construction firm from a very young age. As soon as he graduated from university of the West Indies, he basically like worked for the government for like a year and then opened up his own design and construction firm right after that. And he had built his network of friends who were architects and builders and contractors and stuff, and basically kind of ran his own, was an entrepreneur, basically ran his own company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sort of like that's kind of probably where some of the thought of like me like running my own business was from.
Yeah,
But,
and a minor in economics.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
But at the same time, my personality, I kind of knew that I wasn't sure if that really was the path I was going to take, because
Right.
I kind of lived what it was to be in a household where my father, yes, he did go to work, regularly, because he had an office and a building and everything like that. But there was a lot of like economic turmoil in the country, and with his business and stuff. And so I felt that, right?
Yeah.
And and while he still provided us with a very stable means to continue going to school and not have that too much of that disrupt our lives and our livelihood,
Yeah.
I could still feel the tension of like, oh, when's the next paycheck gonna come, or how are we gonna deal with these bills and da 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 da.
Yeah.
And my mom shielded us from that quite a bit, actually. But it's still there, right?
Yeah.
And so you feel it. So money and that sort of that sort of unstable, not knowing what's going on, kind of like made me think a lot about like really wanting to push for I don't know, getting a job or something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Ability. Yeah.
um. So with that, it's like where so from a young age, it was like we were, as much as he would as much as I would see him, he was more like leading by example. He wasn't like the kind of father who came and like, would tell us lessons and teach us
Yeah.
things in that direct sort of way. He kind of just let us be. And he would even bring us to the construction site. And, as long as we didn't like play in the dangerous spots on the site, he'd like set us down, and he had one of the workmen watch over us. But it was like he took us wherever he went. Like he
Yeah.
didn't matter, right? And so if he had to go talk to somebody, we would just drive with him. And he
Mhm.
used to drive us crazy because we had other things to do. And we were like, he's go off talking to his friend, and we started having this little thing where a minute meant half an hour. When he says half an hour, that he would back in half an hour, it meant 2 hours. It's like that we had that whole thing down.
Right. Bad time.
um, but so so it was more like I was trying to understand him, and he was so frustrating because he was so obtuse, and I was like, what is he about? Like, I mean, I know what he's about, but I don't know
Right.
what he's about.
Mhm.
Um, as I got older, they when I we went on a trip to California, actually, to Los Angeles.
Mhm.
And we went into UCLA, and he's obviously looking for books, and so he goes to the library, and
Mhm.
in there at the front of the bookstore, there was this big, thick, like this thick book
Mhm.
sitting there with Pinocchio on the cover, called Disney Animation: The Illusion of Life. And my
Oh yeah.
mind just went plah, you know. And the only thing about that story was that it was like $100 US for that book.
Yeah.
And just the thought of me thinking that I can ask my parents to buy that book for me was like, I don't know. But I told my mom, it's like, oh, I want to get this book. And I told my dad. And then at the same time, that my brothers managed to find a Star Wars VHS in the back of the store,
Mhm.
and they were bringing it out and saying, can we get this? And so it was a combination, and that was $80 for that Star Wars tape. And and so I was torn because it was either they're going to spend $100 for just me or the
Yeah.
tape would be for the three of us. So I conceded and said, I won't get the book. Let's get the tape. And so we
Hmm.
all got the tape and we watched that thing like a million times.
Right.
However, because of my dad's friend at the bookstore, my following birthday, they had it ordered. He ordered it down, and they gave it to me for my birthday the next year. So
Nice.
that was, and then that thing I dragged to my school. Like I had my book bag with all my books, but I had that other book in there as well. And I'm dragging this heavy book back to school every day just so I could have this book near me and I could just be like looking at these pictures all the time and the artwork and reading it and stuff. So it was like it was nuts. That was like a moment. I mean, and for sure that was the moment where I knew that they were behind me 100%. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that was it. And then the other piece of it was that there was a repeat of this when the computer age was coming up.
Hmm.
The Macintosh was coming up
Yeah.
at the time. I wanted to get a Commodore 64, and my dad basically made it happen. Like
Hmm.
it's like I remember the day when I was coming. I went to visit him in his office, and I saw these boxes there, and I was like, "What's that?" It's like, "That's your computer." Like, what? and and part of it was a bit like he wanted to get the computer anyway because he himself wanted to know more about it, and so
Yeah.
he was thinking he was buying it for himself to learn the computer.
Hmm.
I was mostly using it, and then he would have me do like stuff for him on it, like here, what's this spreadsheet thing? You tell me what this is about, whatever. He'd just
Yeah.
send it to me, like I'm like, what's this? I don't know. I want to play video games.
Right. Right.
but and he never touched it, so I was like, well, okay, fine, I'll keep using it. It's like
That's funny.
but later on, what ended up happening, I thought he had no interest in it. I felt like he got it and he was like, I'm too busy to be bothered. But
Hmm.
when I went to college, that's when our relationship kind of blossomed in terms of him being like a friend in the sense
Hmm.
of like we had a something to talk about together. Because
Yeah.
again, all the philosophy stuff was way over my head, and even though we did have a lot of conversations about it, it was always argumentative. It was about like he's making his point and I'm knocking it down and saying no, no,
Right. Right. Typical
and
father son.
but when it came to he basically ended up buying a computer without requiring my advice. Like he went to New
Mm.
York, he picked up a laptop, and he's walking around with it. And I'm like, hey, you didn't call me, you didn't ask me for what I think is like the thing to get now. And it's like, yeah, I've been reading magazines, I know what to get. So it's like, okay. So I think he just picked it up himself and just ran with it, and
Yeah.
he just became his own little nerd on the computer. And that's when I saw that nerdy side of my dad. Like
Yeah.
and he was nerdy in the sense of like how much he read and stuff, but not like I was more geeky nerdy in art and computers and all this stuff, and he was like into books and da da da.
Yeah.
But then we kind of like we met. It was a meeting of the minds. It was like finally,
Right.
like, yeah, and so yeah, he just became a great uh, person to be around, to chat with, and anything I wanted to bring up, I could just bring up with him, and yeah, it was a great relationship in our adulthood that
Yeah.
blossomed at that point.
That sounds awesome.
When when we were at the point where we wanted to learn about what career we were going to take in our
Hmm.
in our in our lives for high school.
Yeah.
Um, I remember as a kid, my grandmother would ask us, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my answer was, I don't know, maybe something better will come along by the time I get older.
Right.
Because I knew where she was going with that question. Because all her kids, my dad's family, they were like professionals. Like my dad was
Yeah.
an engineer, my aunts were mathematicians and lawyers, legal. They got a legal profession, that sort of thing, and so um they so there was this like I want to say pressure, but there was this idea that, oh well, of course you're going to follow in their footsteps, right? It was kind
Right.
of like a given, and I kind of railed against that like from day one, and I even didn't like the whole like I want to be a fireman, I don't want to be a policeman, and it's like I just didn't like that it just being slotted into a box right away. It's like it was just
Yeah.
not my thing. So I resisted that notion, and by just saying, I don't know, maybe something better will come along. I mean, I've seen the list. I'm looking for
Right.
something else. But I knew that my parents were behind me in whatever I was going for, and they kind of already knew that I was into animation and all that. So I didn't say I wanted to be an animator at the time. I hadn't
Yeah.
quite made that jump yet, but it was like I knew I was not going to be doing any of those things.
Right.
When we were in school, we heard that the Canadian Embassy had a library, and you could do this at the American Embassy too. But we
Mhm.
actually, the Canadian Embassy was closer to our school, so we decided to go after school to check it out. And there you could find all the universities in Canada and read
Mm.
their annual I forget what they call it, the book that has all the courses and everything. There's a name for it, but I can't
Oh
remember
yeah,
now.
like catalog
Well,
or
yeah, it's like a catalog, but there's actually a particular name. Consent. No, I don't know. Anyway, um, so I basically right away I'm looking for animation, right? I'm like, give me all the colleges that have animation in them. And so they gave me the list, and so I went through every single one of them and read their synopsis about what the course would be and stuff.
Mhm.
And a lot of it was like saying, the animation course was like, more experimental and
Yeah.
stop motion, that sort of thing. And but then I found this one course from Sheridan. They had an animation program, but they also had a classical animation program. And
Mhm.
when I saw the classical animation, I just zeroed in on that. I said, let me read this. And it turns out that was a course that was actually set up by Disney to create talent from Canada, right? So they had their Cal Arts over here, but they made a deal with the college in Toronto to basically, well, actually it's Oakville, to basically allow Canadian students to they would bring the kids in there, and then they will have like a pool of people they can sort of like check out, see how they're doing, and
Yeah.
then decide if they want to come work for Disney. But then the program actually got Disney actually turned off. They stopped supporting the program. But the people who were there running it wanted to continue, so they stayed and they continued the program. So it just became its own thing with the college, and now it's a university at this point. But because that was not a university at the time when I was looking at it, my dad was very adamant about, you're getting a BA. I don't know what you're doing, but you're getting a BA. I'm not going to send you away to get a diploma. So it's
Right.
like, so I had to make a deal with him and say, okay, I will go study at the university.
Yeah.
I graduated high school at 16. Um, we usually have 2 years in sixth form where you can actually um, bring up your grades or pick up new subjects or whatever before you get into the track you want to go on.
Yeah.
I took a year off and did some computer internships, and then went away to a boarding school in Canada called Pickering College.
Mhm.
And that allowed me to sort of like, I said, well, if I go to Canada, I could kind of from that standpoint see the landscape from the North American point of view, like see what's
Right.
there. And so from doing that, after graduating high school up in Canada, I got into University of Toronto. And then I discovered that the Sheridan College had a summer course for the
Mhm.
same program that they have during the year. They do it in the summer, and the price was at the same price as getting one course at my university.
Mm.
And so when I found that out, I said, "Well, Dad, I how about I don't come home during the summer? I
Yeah.
stay there. I take the course. I come home maybe like the 2 weeks before I start college again in the fall. I mean,
Mhm.
and so I basically would save up my money for how my living expenses would work out so that I could stay the whole time, and 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 basically like try to see if I can get this diploma as well,
Yeah.
right? And that's what I did. I basically did my animation during the summer while I was
Nice.
doing my university in the fall, and then I would go home for 2 weeks in between.
Nice.
So it was it was always a negotiation that had to happen, right?
Right. Yeah.
But as far as like support,
Right.
um, I guess my family was not opposed to the arts, right, by any
Mhm.
means. It was part of life. So I totally am on the steam side of things instead of just the STEM side of things.
Right.
And but I can understand why people want to shift focus, because we have mostly been focusing on just the A and not the others, right? So I totally get it.
Yeah.
Um, so with that, with me, I think because I was mostly focused on my studies, I would say that because I was someone who drew a lot, from a very young age, I had this way about me that could settle myself down and be quiet and
Yeah.
not have to be running around and making noise and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So since I already had that sort of like ability, I think I could take to study. I would do my studies, but I never really was. I wouldn't consider myself like a smart kid in that sort of like always going for the A pluses and like
Mm-hmm.
that. When I I didn't really like school, to be honest. It's like, but I did it. I did it because that's what people did, right? That's
Yeah.
what we were supposed to do. So we'll do this thing. And I really for the longest while was just sort of like, and it wasn't. I think I was just so focused on drawing and animation and wanting to know how to do that everything else kind of fell by the wayside, and I was less interested in the other stuff.
Yeah.
And it's only when the other stuff became interesting that I would sort of like engage,
Yeah.
right? But if I was in a class and the teacher was not there for the subject, I wasn't there either. I was like, I'm drawing.
Right. Right. Right.
I'm making little flip books with the thick textbooks that they had in those classes.
Gotcha.
Uh, but at the same time, I did have a lot of curiosity for things. I did enjoy nature, and I kind of found nuggets of things in the classes that caught my interest, right? So I was always kind of like more focused on those things that interested me out of whatever subject I was in. Um, but I was never embracing of any sort of subject overall.
Mm-hmm.
I did okay in maths, I, except for a long time I was not great. And then I actually finally had a math teacher who was really she was very clear. Like
Yeah.
as soon as she came into the class the first day, it was kind of like this person was teaching a course in maths, but I understood everything she was saying.
Yeah.
Whereas I had teachers who literally were there coming in, they say open the book, and they would start talking, and it was literally like Charlie Brown
Yeah.
sounds coming out of their mouths, and it's like but with her it was like, oh, yes, and I was actually understanding, and I was
Yeah.
actually like doing the lessons, and I was doing the stuff, and it's like, oh, this all makes sense now.
Right.
So it opened my eyes to a lot of stuff in math, so that I was literally like, it was there, but I was just not engaging at all. And then
Yeah.
I all of a sudden became engaged. I was like, oh, um, and so I would say that when I was talking about how I was looking at my courses for animation and saying, what do I do? The thing that came to mind was I knew I wasn't going to get involved in medicine because I couldn't stand the sight of blood. And so
Like, oh my God.
I already knew that about myself. I said, I'm not going to do medicine. And so chemistry was like chemistry and physics were the only two. So biology was out, chemistry and physics. I said, okay. And I mostly leaned on physics. So I was more into like the cosmos, astrophysics, Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of stuff. I was
Yeah.
more into that than I was into blowing stuff up with chemistry. I was not, it was interesting, but I was like, but I like stars and space and that whole thing,
Right.
science fiction, all that stuff was all where I was leaning to it. And I said, well, at least with physics, I could animation is motion, and motion having some understanding of real physics and motion could be
Yeah.
helpful. So I kind of leaned into physics a little bit more as one of the sciences, and then then there was a math component in there as well, which actually were connected and did help. Actually, the physics did help me out even more with the math, because it was like the application of math to something real.
Right.
And so it made a lot of sense for me that way. And so I kind of was engaged in it much later in my high school life, that I was sort of in that world. And then right around the time when Star Wars came out, I mean, of course, as kids, we were just like, actually, I have a funny story about Star Wars. When we were kids just watching Star Wars, like everybody talks about like, when we went to Star Wars, man, it just blew our minds. We were in the theater watching Star Wars. For us, we went to the drive-in theater to watch movies, right? Because our parents would basically go to watch a movie they want to see, and then there was a playground in the back that they would just like drop us off at and just be playing with the other kids, right? So while we were there playing, we still had view of the screen, but we'll be playing in the playground while the movie's going on, right? So of course, when you're watching all these movies, unless it had some action in there somewhere, you're busy swinging in swings, playing on the slides until something blows up, and you're like, oh, what's that? So we went to see Star Wars. It was in the drive-in, and literally, like, for us, yes, granted, it was, we knew it was we just saw it as another space movie, but it was, hey, this space movie is it's on point. It's got some good stuff. But then there was moments where there was the action, and then there's moments where people are talking. So most of the times we were just like on the slides and the swings until Darth Vader shows up. So, oh wait, hang on. Okay, something blew up, and now they're talking again. Okay, get back on the slide. So that was our introduction to Star Wars. So it's like we enjoyed it. We watched the explosion at the end, and everyone was all happy and all that. And we said, "Yeah, it was a great movie," But we didn't have that like, hey, this is something we have not seen before. This is like everything is on point. And I think a lot of that has to do with, at least for me, I don't know about my brothers, but for me, I used to watch any science fiction, like you could give me the little rubber ducky going across eating people. I'm watching that, a little stringy floating spaceship flying by. I'm watching that. I didn't care, because in my mind, even though I was looking at those visuals that were cheaply made, I'm imagining the real thing in my head as it happens. And all that Star Wars did for me is to say, oh, there's the thing that I would have seen in my head done right. Like it was, it's like what I expected to see. And you guys are doing it. Nice job.
Great job catching up with my brain.
Yes, exactly.
Like, finally. What took y'all so long?
So it's like but we did go to see it in the theater afterwards, and actually much older, and really to watch it for what it is, to really appreciate it. And then that's when it clicked in for me, like, this is something unprecedented for how they did it, because we really weren't paying attention. The drive-through, it's like playground was taking over.
Nice, being a kid, that's what's up.
Yeah.
So this is the part of the interview where I list some of the projects that you've worked on, so people can know, like, people who look like us worked on the things that we loved. And I use IMDb, so feel free to correct me, because sometimes IMDb is wrong. So
okay.
And I'm not gonna list everything, but
Yeah.
Okay. Pebble the Penguin, which I have that VHS.
Wow.
Anastasia.
That was my first feature film that I worked on. Yeah.
Anastasia, The Road to El Dorado. Let's see. I'll say Vanilla Sky, Clock Stoppers, Polar Express, Monster House, Meet the Robinsons, Bolt, Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph, Frozen, Big Hero 6, Zootopia, Moana. It's like I won't say everything, but I'm saying kind of everything that I'm seeing. Raya and the Last Dragon, Encanto, Baymax, Strange World. That's where your IMDb ends, but there's more.
I also worked on the first X-Men movie. That was my first foray into live action. Yeah.
So is there anything poignant that you would like to say about anything that you worked on? Is there like a favorite or a monumental project that you worked on? A monumental for your personal life?
Well, for my personal life, I would say I really enjoyed working on Big Hero 6, the movie. It had a lot of challenges. It's my second round going into supervising, and it was also the movie that I won a Visual Effects Society award for, which I had no idea I was going to win. It's like I was just doing my job.
Right.
And then when that happened, it was like a pleasant surprise. It's like, oh, really? Oh, okay.
I did the goodiest of jobs.
Yeah. So that I got to enjoy. That was a nice moment, I thought, in my career. And I really enjoyed working on that movie. Like, the movie was really good. A great project to be on. More recently, actually, Strange World was like my favorite project for in terms of the challenges that we were facing and the
Mm-hmm.
team that I had to work with. They
Mm-hmm.
stepped up. We had a ton of challenges on our show, and but my team, they came from all kinds. Like it wasn't like I had the A plus team. It was like these are all great players, and you know I had a few key players and a few others, but it was like it didn't matter who was on the team.
Yeah.
Everybody stepped up, and they were doing like amazing work. Like
Nice.
that's where I had a lot of fun collaborating and working with them, and it just came to realize, like, the folks that are at the studio, the level of artistry and the sort of where people are at, like, it's like to me that was a time when I felt like this is my tribe for sure. Like,
Yeah.
that we all try to make the best looking thing we can,
Yeah.
and we're all in it for each other and for each other to be excuse me, to be doing well and making great work. And so once we were, even though we were faced with a challenge, we were all helping each other out and making sure we all got there. So it was a great experience for me in that sense.
I know this is random, but it makes me think of like offense wins games, defense wins championships. Like yeah, you can have the most talented people, but you got to have that like grit and like preventativeness and troubleshooting. And,
Yeah.
yeah. So, what would you say you love about animation?
um I think mostly, I mean, it has changed for me over the years because of how it was perceived by the society, and how what the people expectations were. I mean, I think mostly it was the ability to sort of like go anywhere, but and do anything. But there's a kind of a if it's done right, there's a kind of a joy that you experience that I don't think you necessarily can experience looking at real people. and and it's when those moments happen that I really really appreciate it. There's a place where animation can come into its own, and it's really when it tackles subjects or certain kind of like entertainment that like hits your soul in a way that you don't think you would have ever gotten any other way, but
Yeah,
somehow it's poignant and it makes sense, and you see it taking place and you enjoy it for what it is. And then only afterwards you start to realize, I was just watching a bunch of pixels on screen with some
yeah,
nuts flying around, but I had so much feeling, and the thing just hit me in a certain way.
yeah.
Um, and I think I kind of live for those moments, like when we get to do something that brings all that together
Hmm.
in that way for the audience. Like, I feel like that's the magic of animation, and when it's done
Yeah,
right that way.
yeah. Sometimes it's making me think of you know, as people who enjoy animation. Sometimes like okay, you know, if you're into anime, you like this. If you're into Warner Brothers, if you're into Disney, but like
Mm.
something that Inside Out and Inside Out Two can do is like regular people who might not watch animation, they're like when you're talking about the storytelling and it hitting you, that's
Yeah,
the power of Inside Out and Inside Out 2 is that it can make regular people be like, oh, this animation thing, I don't know if I noticed that it's animation or I'm willing to move past me thinking animation is for kids, but this is a good movie.
yeah, yes, exactly. I had one of those experiences. Remember, I was saying my older brother is like a rebel into cars and stuff.
Yeah.
He visited me when I was going to college in Canada, and I was I took him to the theater, and I said, I was kind of embarrassed because I was like, bro, there's this movie about a mermaid that I want to go see. Would you be okay checking it out with me? And he was like, okay, bro. So he tagged along. And this is at a time when Disney, animated movies, people weren't really caring so much about them, and they weren't great or whatever. But he knew
Yeah.
that I was into animation and I was into cartoons, so he was willing to go with me on it, and sat there and watched it. And it was a musical on top of which, and so I was kind of like embarrassed to even be sitting there and going, I hope he's not gonna fall asleep, or he's gonna like hate me for bringing him here or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And the movie's over, and I look over and he goes, "Dude, that was really good." He was like, "What?" He was like, "What?" He totally got into it. Like, he was like totally taken in, and it was cool because that was, I mean, we had Roger Rabbit the year before, and I already felt like animation was on its way back,
Yeah.
but when I saw Little Mermaid, I thought that's when I felt like Disney's back, like Disney is
Yeah.
like back, and uh and then he was like, he said he sealed the deal for me. It's like they got to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't just a fanboy. They got to, like, Vin Diesel
Yeah.
over here.
Or like, come to the dark side. You started off as an animator. Like, how did you get into lighting?
So okay, so I went to Canada to study my tertiary education. Like, I went to University of Toronto, did fine art studio for my BFA, and I also minored in economics because I somehow thought some business would help, have some
Yeah.
understanding if I'm going to ever run a studio.
Right.
It was like my minor, and so I wanted to. How I got into lighting was when I got into animation. I wanted to be an animator. All this time I've been pushing really hard to be an animator, and everything I was doing was in that track. But what ended up happening for me is, like, I didn't take to it the way I thought I would. Like, the actual craft of animation, I
Yeah.
struggled for a long
Yeah.
time. It was not. I had the patience for drawing all the drawings. That was not the issue. It was that I felt like I was missing an understanding, a definitive understanding, that I saw all the other kids that were doing it were like,
Yeah.
they were just doing it, and I was still like, why is it? It feels really hard. Like, I'll do my first drawing and be like, okay, this is great. And I do a second drawing, it's like, oh, this sucks. Okay,
Yeah.
that was not okay. I'm only doing well on one. It's like, not, what about 2 and 3 and 4?
Right.
And so I kind of at that point, I would say that I think I skipped over a bunch of things. I started off doing animation because I went to Sheridan College to study animation, and then when I graduated, I got a job at a studio called Lightbox, and they basically were telling me that I could learn how to do animation, but it was a summer job that I took over, and I wasn't. I kind of wasn't. My visa was going to expire, and I didn't want to get into a situation where I was, like, not in the country legally, kind of thing.
Yes.
I didn't want to be involved in any of that under the table stuff. So I was already prepared to, like, pack my bags and leave and go home and work on my portfolio so that I can apply for jobs at the studios back in the States or in Canada, whoever is doing movies at the time. And when that didn't happen for me, or at least when I chose to leave, I went home and actually got a job as an animator, right? Like, they were actually looking for an animation position at this post house. And I think that's the part that was, like, I didn't expect that I would have actually been able to go home and find an animation job. Like, that was what they wanted. And I was like, oh, okay. And I had learned how to use computers in the process, because I actually was planning on finishing my animation education by going back and taking a year of computer animation, because I knew about what Pixar was doing with the Tin Toy stuff and Luxor Junior and all that. And so I knew I probably should just take the 1-year course in computer animation just to have that under my belt, so in case the industry does a pivot, into that. Right? But when I went home, they decided to pay for getting me an SGI machine, which is one of the workstations that they used to use for doing this stuff, and fly me out to Canada, where I was, for like a 1-week course to learn how to use it, and then come back and then use it to make commercials and stuff, which is what I did for about a couple of years. And so I was doing that, but in that process, my buddy who I knew at Sheridan, he gives me a call. He was working at Don Bluth Studios in Ireland. Kind of says, "Hey, how'd you like to work for Don Bluth?" And I was like, "Huh?" Okay. So I had this opportunity to go out and work for a feature film company, and so I had to tell my employer, like, that I had that opportunity. And so, sad as he was to let me go, he did understand the situation and said, I wish you good luck and all that. And we're still friends. I still go back and visit him every time I go home. And he was a great. My old boss was like a great person. he himself he's a fantastic engineer, and the way he ran his post house and everything, and we just kept in touch over the years after that, right? So that's how I kind of got into the industry, and then later on, I kind of like ended up. Okay, so the company the Don Bluth Studios I was working for in Ireland, Don and his partner Gary Goldman, they ended up leaving that studio and moving to the States, and they ended up getting a deal with Fox to build another animation studio there. And so we kind of applied for positions at that studio, and that's kind of how I got to the States.
Oh, nice.
And so that's why we made Anastasia, right? So around yeah. So I was a computer generalist at that point in time, because when I was working for Don Bluth, I was doing some computer work for them when I got there, and so I kind of shifted out of hand-drawn animation already into doing sort of like computer modeling and that sort of thing. So I wasn't animating per se, although we did have to animate some of the models and props and stuff that were moving around on the set and stuff. But I was mostly modeling and learning all the 3D stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I got to do a little bit more of that when I was in the States, because roughly around the time the second Jurassic Park came out, Anastasia had this Pegasus at the end of the movie that comes to life. It's like a statue that sort of comes alive, and we were having to do this in 3D because it had textures on it and everything. They wanted to keep the feeling of the background painting. So that was like my first sort of like computer animated, character moment, right? Kind of thing. And then from that, I think I was there for another couple of years. We were starting to work on the next movie. It was called Titan AE, but I didn't get to work on that to finish it out. I actually just worked on some early stuff. I had transitioned to DreamWorks in LA. That's when I kind of moved out to California, and that was, I thought I was going to get there someday. So I was at DreamWorks, and we were working on El Dorado. Excuse me. On El Dorado. The thing I didn't realize at the time, because I thought I was just I was a computer generalist. I knew all aspects of the computer craft for movies, right? So you would build stuff, you would texture paint it, you would light it, and you would render it out and all that. So we call ourselves generalists from that standpoint. Now each one of those things is an individual job. Like you have to specialize in those particular things. I didn't realize at the time that I actually signed up as an effects animator. I go back and I look at my contract for DreamWorks and it says effects artist. I'm like, wait a minute, I actually got hired as an effects artist. I didn't even know that. It's like, because I think that this was already the movement towards specializing people, right? So it was like, I didn't had shifted into this like one track, I thought we were just doing this everything thing, right?
Right.
After El Dorado was completed, it was going to be a bit of a gap between the two productions, and the studio was trying to find ways to not. They were laying people off, but they were doing it in a way where if you wanted to find another job, go ahead, and then hopefully we'll get you on the way back, coming back to the studio.
Yeah.
So we kind of were out looking for jobs and stuff, and so I got into a visual effects house at the time called Cinesight, who at the time were looking for lighters, and so that was sort of like my first foray into live action, but also as a lighting artist, right? That was the specific channel of lighting in particular. And again, it was sort of like I was just narrowing down one aspect of skills that I already had in one sense, right? But now this is your day job, is just doing this part. So in terms of getting into lighting, that was like how I would say where I started off, where I eventually ended up into lighting.
Yeah. It's like, for me, since moving to LA, because I'm a 3D modeler, but it's like, I need to pay bills. So what job can I get? So like, I've been an assistant editor, production coordinator, script coordinator, and it's just like, I'm collecting skills like Pokemon. Like, as long as y'all pay me so I can pay my bills, I'll do anything, to be honest. So what are you willing to give me a chance to do? Thank you. Appreciate it. Still living here. What do you feel is your superpower? And it doesn't have to be animation related.
I gotta think about that one. A lot of times I have to refer to things back when I was a kid, but I would say as a kid, my superpower was powers of observation. I was a very shy kid,
Yeah.
I didn't really engage a lot in. I couldn't stand small talk. But don't get. If you want to talk to me for real. But don't give me none of this like. No time for that. So I tended to be very shy and not really engaged
Uh-huh.
in connecting. But I will say that in the meantime, while I was doing that, I was mostly observing
Yeah.
other people doing those things,
Mhm.
and and in a way, it gave me a sense of understanding my place, or understanding a situation, or my place in a situation. If you want to say like the spidey sense is tingling kind of thing, it's a bit
Yeah.
like that. Like maybe that's my superpower. Is like I could kind of sense like this is about to go sideways. I don't think I want to be here right now. It's like,
It's like you're seeing the like the what do they call it in animation, like the anticipation or
yeah,
the preemptive incident, the inciting incident, or like you're seeing the before what everybody else is seeing.
yeah. I kind of pick up on certain when I see how certain people are
Oh, the
acting,
corner of their
or
mouth twitched like two, like
yeah. It's a bit like that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But I would say I was probably much better practiced when I was a kid.
yeah,
I think as I got older, I kind of came out of my shell a little bit.
yeah,
I still feel like that shy kid is still there,
yeah,
but I've been focusing more on trying to engage and be connected to people, and
yeah,
it's sort of like what's hard is figuring out like who. Well, not figuring out actually, and here's the other thing: it's not hard. It's not hard. If it's hard to figure out whether you should connect to this person, that should already tell you something right there,
right,
because it shouldn't be that hard.
right,
That's what I came to realize. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, you have to work at this. No, you
hmm,
connect. You just connect. For me, I've come to learn that about a lot of friends of mine over the
hmm,
years that I've met here in the States, that I wasn't reading the signs very well. I was observing it,
yeah,
and the thing, and what cued me into a lot of it was listening to a lot of Black comedians. That
yeah,
kind of helped me, because I was paying attention to the nuances of what they were saying, and then I was watching how people were behaving, and I was going,
hmm,
oh. And then George Floyd happened, and it just came crystal clear to me. Like I just
yeah.
was like, oh,
It's like the difference between hearing and listening. Like you
yeah,
were observing, but you weren't reading.
yeah. And the thing is, and again, you were talking about knowledge and ignorance and stuff, and I was like, I had knowledge, but I
Yeah.
wasn't living here to
Hmm.
know
But you
what it
didn't have
really meant.
context.
Yes, yes. And until I went to the African American Museum as well, and I saw the story of Emmett Till,
Hmm.
that also become another point, because I didn't really know that story that well. I've heard rumblings of that story,
Yeah.
meaning I've heard of people talking about it outside of the name of the individual who was affected, and so I had certain context of like certain things happened in a certain way. Yes, I didn't have a particular name attached to the person, but I knew that stuff happened, right?
Hmm.
Same with Tulsa. I knew what went on there, but I didn't have the direct
Yeah.
story,
Hmm.
right? And once I came into contact with the direct stories, I was
Hmm.
like, huh, now I understand.
Yeah. I usually state it a different way, but in the context of this conversation, I feel like for African immigrants and for like Caribbean immigrants and maybe
Uh-huh.
other like diasporan immigrants, the
Mm.
ignorance is your superpower. That helps you navigate and not kind of be brought down by the crud of the
Yeah.
Black American experience
Uh-huh.
until it kind of hits you in your face.
Right. Right.
And then you're
Exactly.
like, oh, that's what they're talking about. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would. I think that's one thing I would like to see more of, and I think it's starting to happen a little bit, but I don't think it's there yet. Is
Yeah,
the sharing of our experiences, because
yeah,
we all understand that we have similar aspects of
yeah,
our experiences, uh, but at the same time, it's, and again, it's not to say that you want to get brought down by it. It's
yeah,
really what it is. It's like that's also a connection for us as well, right?
yeah,
And and understand, and because part of understanding that history as it relates to us is also understanding a part of the history that is trying to be sort of like ignored. Like
yeah,
it's literally like they don't. No one wants to talk about this. No one wants to like deal with it. And
yeah,
and never mind like even our own personal history, because like we would learn about stuff in Trinidad, like what went on with the colonialists and what they were doing with the country and how they dealt with people and all that kind of stuff. Um, but they don't teach that stuff in school. They don't
right,
tell you anything that. They just tell you, there was a war of this and a war of that, and we won, and that's the British. They're saying we won this war and we won that war and all this kind of stuff. But they don't tell you what the wars meant or anything.
yeah,
And but then we know kind of like where we're at, and we're saying this is the result of all that, right?
yeah,
How do we end up here, right?
yeah,
Um, and so like what I felt like what happened in America was this sort of like this sort of, which is starting to kind of come back now a little bit, uh, is this deliberate like the racism in your face directness,
yeah,
right? But then what we lived in British colonies, and I would say more so like what goes on in Canada than here, is that it's a kind of like it's sort of like it's in the water. It's just everywhere. I
that
just
kind of
don't.
is what happens in the north of America too.
In the north, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
actually, yeah, that's
because
that, you're
I
right.
lived in the north.
Mm-hmm,
I'm from Michigan, and I've
mm-hmm,
lived in the south. Hated it. Not necessarily because of the racism, which I
uh-huh,
did endure. It's just it's not my personality. But yeah, it's kind of
yeah.
like what like to be honest, when I moved to California, I was like, what kind of racism am I going to deal with over here? Like what brand? And not that it's, yeah, I'm not going to
Yeah,
be delusional to think that it's just going to go away because I'm in a liberal place. But like, well, what brand do I deal with over here?
yeah, yeah. That one I'm still working out, because it's like I kind of, there again. There's another understanding that I see there that I'm picking up on, like the little thing goes off or whatever.
Yeah,
But at the same time, it's like I'm not exactly sure what that's about. Like I'm like,
yeah,
what is this? But still trying to figure that piece out. Whereas with
yeah,
the South, I kind of know. I kind of like
yeah, yeah,
I got you guys. Yeah, you're very clear. You are clear about your statement. I get it. This other one, it's like.
and that's what one of my exes he made a point because he was from Mississippi and he moved to Louisiana when David Duke was like kind of
Mm,
who was the head of the KKK. He
yeah,
was kind of in power in Louisiana, and his family kind of didn't understand like why would you want to live in Louisiana? And it's like I know what to expect. Like when it's like under in the underbelly, it's like you have this glass ceiling, but you don't know why. But
yeah,
he was like, if it's out in the open, I know what I'm dealing with.
right, right, exactly. Yeah, yep.
But also for me, as I like learn more about the Caribbean stories and like what's going on in the Caribbean, the history of what went on in the Caribbean countries and like the history of what happened in the African countries. That's what makes me confused as a Black American because I'm like, wait, we have similarities. Like, why does this not bring us together?
Right, right.
I'm so confused.
Yeah,
Like we gotta endure like the same thing. Like what
yeah,
what why are we acting like this? Like
yeah,
but I
yeah,
know we know why. But like we don't have to get into it, but we know why.
yeah. No, we know why. We know why. Yeah, yeah. But I bet it. But I really felt it. Like uh, the thing that I took away from the George Floyd experience, at least from me, um, is that I found a connection with all of us from that, because globally we all responded, and and it gave me, like, I would say, like, growing up there was a bit of that competitiveness between like Africa versus Caribbean versus American, you
Yeah,
know, and it's like we were all like, well, who's gonna win first? Who's gonna be the first of the? We broke through. We did it. It's like who's gonna make
yeah,
it there and da da da, and it's like, yeah, but even if you make it there, there's still the other folks that haven't made it there, so you haven't really made it there. So,
yeah,
it's like that. That's the part I was kind of like, yeah. So then I was like, well, why don't we just lift everybody up regardless? It's like just gonna be part of helping
yeah.
the weight pushed up.
Yeah.
And so I took a lot of the noise in my head that got put in there about how I perceive the other Black folks in our diaspora. I hear you. I hear this stuff still going through because I've been sort of programmed that way by culture and all this kind of stuff. But I am going to move that out.
Yeah.
And take it as it comes.
Yeah.
So if you're in front of me, I will listen to you. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not. I just want to. I want to embrace everyone. All of us, and I want all of us to succeed. And so I love it that we can now go to a movie theater and we can hear an African name being mentioned as the leading actor, and no one's trying to cover it up with some Americanized, anglicized version of the name. Say it. Even if I can't say it, I don't care. It's there. It's in print. It's there. An African name. Thank you.
Or the Winstons.
Or the Winstons.
That's like the main. I can't remember any other Caribbean names, but like, I would say more about it. I was like, I know Winston.
Like, you know Winston? That's the Caribbean name. Well, that's my
Caribbean coded. Huh?
That's my dad's name.
Oh.
See, dad is Winston.
I know a little something. But like, for me, there were multiple takeaways for like George Floyd, but one of my like unique takeaways as a Black American was like, we and this is not for like the diaspora. It's mostly for the majority. I'm kind of referencing, but like we said this the whole time, and then I remember one of my Facebook friends kind of he's Black. He put like a Facebook status of like what was different about George Floyd for like white people or whatever, and one lady was like, oh, we saw what happened to him, and it was just like it was offensive because it's like, why do you have to see it for it to like like, I understand seeing something is more powerful, but it's like everybody was forced to sit down because it was COVID, and so they were forced to see it. But it's like we weren't believed. You didn't believe our words,
right?
But you had to see something happen to him. I still haven't seen the video. I stopped watching videos. Walter Scott is the first in 2015 is the first video that I refused to watch, and I haven't seen a video since of anybody being killed. Yeah. But like, I'm just like, dang, why did you have to see it? Why didn't you just believe us?
Yeah, I didn't have to see the video. I didn't want to see the video. I
feel like it normalizes it, and I don't want to normalize that.
No, it's ridiculous.
And for me,
it's
myself personally.
And I'm no interest in watching a snuff video. I'm sorry, it's not my thing. And so I just have to know that's you tell me what happened. I believe you with that because that's how it is. And the thing is, it's so annoying because I think what hit me with it is watching the reaction to that moment and then realizing like, this isn't a special moment. Like, this is not an extra, this is not an anomaly. This is not some abnormal moment. It was, and the media just drummed it up that way. And then everybody responded. And of course it's global, like you said, everybody was home, so they saw it. But it's like, really? You're now saying that? Like, no. It's like, I mean, Emma Till, hello? Did you not see what happened there?
Because it was in like Alton Sterling.
Decades ago.
The guy in New York who was selling the loose cigarettes, like it's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And all those folks, it's like, and Trayvon, it's like, how is it that you were hearing about it all this time, and none of those got the reactions that they did, but this one did, and it's because you were sitting home watching it on your TV. Yeah, like, that's the difference. And the thing is, it wasn't that made me shift. Like how people were reacting to it wasn't what the reason for my shift. My shift was, I started to realize in my own head how much stuff that was sort of broken messaging
Yeah.
that was running through, that I had to just look at it and say, I don't want this anymore. I
Yeah.
don't. This doesn't need to happen. And it almost gave me it gave me a breath of fresh air. Like
Yeah.
it was a moment of like
Awakening, rising phoenix.
yeah, and even for how I want to be in the world going
Yeah.
forward, there was a way I was being in the world before
Mhm.
that I was kind of like, I don't know exactly know how to explain it. I was kind of like not wanting to. No, it was like I wasn't really no, I wasn't really engaged, and
Yeah.
now I'm more engaged because I am paying attention to the choices I make when it regards to connecting and meeting people of my own race, like
Yeah.
how I interact and make connections with those folks, how, like, regardless of where they're from, and I have to take into account where they're from because
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
matters, right? And in a way, it gave me a freedom, almost in a way relating to our own people the way other people relate to their own races that don't have the trauma of slavery attached to it, right?
Mhm.
You acknowledge that your brother across the ocean or your sister across the ocean, and so when they show up on your doorstep, you acknowledge them and you greet them, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
and you don't hold them to any sort of like other
Yeah.
ideology or account or whatever. You take them as they are
Yeah.
and let them prove you wrong, or
Yeah.
let them prove you right, or
Yeah.
whatever. It's
Yeah.
like, and because a lot of times things were already drummed up in our heads to set us
Yeah.
up for
Yeah.
the dynamic of having a discourse that was unproductive to
Right.
our connection, right?
It's like the freedom of agency because you
Yes,
were like fed some information that you kind of walk that path, but now you get to determine for yourself how you interact with other people.
yes, exactly. Exactly. It was a piece I started to realize I've been doing this for most of my life with all these other things, but I have not been doing it with this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. I just realized, hang on a second, get that off the shelf.
Yes. It's like, wait, this is from a certain lens.
Exactly.
You need to put some other prescriptions on. Wait, like, did you watch Black Mirror?
I only seen the Star Trek one. I haven't watched a lot
There
of it.
was one episode where it was like they had these like it was like military and they had these like contraptions, like they had these helmets that made the people look like monsters, but they were
Yeah.
actually human beings.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so it was like you could feel more free to kill the monsters, but once you
Right.
realize you kind of like you weren't supposed to remove the helmet, I don't think, but like once they
Mhm.
removed the helmet and like, oh dang, I'm killing like real people.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, now this is a different perspective.
Right. Yeah. It makes it easy when
We
you
got deep. We got deep. Now to like pivot to a totally different thing.
Mhm.
So you've done powerlifting in the past. What drew you to that?
I have a personal trainer, and I do it mostly just to stay healthy. I love playing the game of Ultimate Frisbee, and just like to stay fit. And my trainer was, I think at the time, he was taking a lot of his clients, basically going through powerlifting kind of stuff, and in a way, it kind of gave us a goal as we're
Yeah.
working throughout the year for something to do.
Yeah.
And he himself was also doing it, and I basically went to one of his competitions and watched it and said, "Oh, I think I can do that." I could take a try. I could give it out a try. And I'm not one for going in front of people. Like I'm just
Yeah.
not a stage person in that way. So I went, did my first competition. I think it was 2011. I think. And I did it for about 6 years, and then I stopped because my last competition, I tore my bicep tendon, and I was trying not to stop for that reason because I actually wanted to come back. But by the time I was able to come back, COVID happened, and so that sort of like kind of put a delay on it, even still, to the point now it's like, not really.
That was a moment in time.
Because again, my goals were just to stay fit and healthy. I was
Yeah.
really like, it was just and at the time too, I noticed there was a dip in the records during that age, between 45 and 50, where we've and I surmise that, oh, this must be when everybody's having a midlife crisis, so they kind of peace out with their kids and everything,
Yeah.
dealing with stuff, life and stuff. So nobody's making records in that period. so I was able to kind of like jump in and like get a California state record as a result.
Oh,
I was
nice.
able to beat the record that was there, at least for 1 year, until some guy beat me.
Because you persisted.
I kept going.
That's like essentially what the kept going thing. That's essentially like with artists. Like we were all 5-year-olds drawing, and they're like, "Oh, this is hard," and it might have been easy, it might have been hard for us, but we just kept going. Like, we just kept going.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, as a, I don't know if you consider yourself a veteran, but as a veteran, or as you're approaching being a veteran in the animation industry, what have you decided is your like purpose in regards to like maybe representation for Caribbean animation professionals, or do you do anything in particular in that area?
I mean,
I know you went to I saw you went to Animate Caribbean, like
Animate Caribbean. Yeah, I've been
yeah.
a couple of times to Animate Caribbean. I know Camille. She invited me down a couple of times, and I had a great time with the folks when I went down there and met a lot of cool people. I haven't been in a while. I should give her a call actually, just to see what's going on. And no, I've just been super busy, and it's been kind of hard for me to get back during that time to get to see the show. But in terms of like connecting, I guess I'm trying to find avenues. I'm trying to find ways of like how to connect, and I've been open. Like I've been going and talking to people, and say, here's my email address, and send me an email if you want to chat with me about stuff. And I'm down. Like I'm down for whatever whatever. If there are people with questions and stuff, I'm happy to answer them and stuff. So as far as like how I want to engage, I don't know yet. I think that's one of the things. It's like I don't know yet, and I've had some engagement with some folks, and then it's gone quiet for a while, and then it's like I'll go again and engage, and it goes quiet for a while. So I have to kind of like keep sticking my neck out. But it's I'm here.
I'm open. I'm available. And that's what, like, for me, as growing in my career, and I've ventured in different avenues of different things, but it's like, if somebody says that they're open to being contacted, if nobody in the room is going to try you, I will. If I'm the only person in the room that reached out, because I was at a conference, and this lady was like, there's like 200 people in this room, and I would give everybody in this room my contact information. You know why? Because none of you are going to reach out. and as BlkWmnAnimator, my platform, I have lived that, where I'm like begging people, like, please, like, I'll go to a Comic-Con, I'll go to a conference, somebody will come up to me, and I'm like, please reach out to me, and they don't. It's like, I'm open and willing, but y'all don't want to use my free labor.
Yeah, I've actually stepped off of social media, so that makes it a little harder. I have not. I don't really. I mean, I still have my Facebook account just so I can hop in and every now and again to see stuff that my family talks about or whatever. But I'm not actively engaged in it. But what happens is, over the years, people have reached out to me, and I've given them, the answers or whatever, point them in the directions that would be helpful to them. And so I'm more or less just that part I could say I'm consistent in, is that it's what's hard is that I think some people try to reach me, and if they reach me through a channel that is not necessarily one that I use, and so I'll find like years later, like, oh my God, this person asked me a question.
When people reach out to me on Twitter, I'm like, you really don't want to contact me, because I see Twitter messages like 4 months later, and I'm on Twitter all the time, and I'm like, well, I don't know why I didn't get the notification, but you really don't want to reach me if you reach out to me on Twitter.
Yeah. And I would just say, like, if I don't respond, send it again.
Yeah.
Don't stop.
Yeah.
You know, because at some point I will see it, and then I'll be like, oh, and then you know, I usually respond when I see someone asking a question about something. So, yeah,
So
or at
what
least
platform, even if it's 4 months later, what platform is the best one to reach out to you on?
that's a well. A good
It's not
question.
going to be quick, but it'll be eventual. Like which platform is that?
So the email is one way, and then if you look on my I think it should be on there, olunriley.com. That's my demo reel site, even though I haven't updated it in over 10 years. Because the last movie on it is Tangled, and I've worked on a bunch of movies since then.
Yeah.
Frozen and Frozen 2.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I need to update that reel. But it's like I haven't left the studio yet, so I haven't.
Right.
So yeah, so I think my contact information is on there. It should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's one way you can reach out to me. And then you know, ideally what you want to get, you'd want to get to an email situation, so that way I have a thread of you in there, so that we can, if you need to ping me again, you can, right?
Yeah.
It's the first established contact, so that you know that I'm alive and I know you're alive and not a bot, and then we can and we know we have a back and forth, then we can, you know, we can work things out.
If someone was producing a documentary about you, what things would you want them to highlight outside of your work in animation and entertainment?
Oh, geez. I don't know. I don't think I've been mostly working in animation. It's been a lot. That's been a lot of my life. Actually,
you have a life outside of animation.
Do I?
Right? Are you sure about that? Sometimes when I ask this question, it's like the come to Jesus meeting, where it's like, oh, maybe I should start doing things outside of it.
I need to get some hobbies. That's what I mean, it's like I think of a lot of things that I want to do, and it's a lot of it is sort of like, currently anyways, been put on the back burner for, like, oh, when I retire I might pick up painting, or, you know, doing this or that, the other thing. Because the only thing right now that kind of keeps me going outside of animation is playing Ultimate Frisbee. You know, and that is like, I can't say don't do a documentary about that, because I ain't no, like, you know, pro player or anything like that. So you know, it's like I'm just doing it to stay healthy and keep my body in motion, to counteract all the sitting at my desk that I'm doing, you know, for the other part of my life. So but that's my other passion. Like, that's the thing that gets me going and keeps me sort of like in it, you know, like you know, I sort of like I feel rejuvenated, kind of much the way surfers do when they go out and surf and they come back and they just feel like, you know, on top of the world. It's like I kind of get refreshed when I do that. But yeah, I mean, I'm mostly just really, my head is just down on this animation. Like, I'm just like so hyper focused on it, you know. So I can't really say I have much going on outside.
It's okay.
Other than that, it's sort of just about me, like, you know, eating good food and hanging out with some friends. It's like, you know.
Man, the way, because I went to school in upstate New York, and like, being from Michigan, it's like black, white, Hispanic, or no, and not black, white, Mexican, Arabic. When I went to school in upstate New York, I went to school with a bunch of people from New York City. I'm like, whoa, everybody has a flag. Like, and then I learned that, like, Caribbean men can cook, and I was like, free food, I'm in. Yes, like, you don't have to tell me twice. I will be where. Oh, this person. Okay, I'll be at his apartment. Okay, it was very communal. So they're like playing dominoes and everything. But I'm like,
nice.
Oxtail, please.
And this side of plantains. Love those.
Yes. Yes. And then, like, at my university, they on Mondays, this Dominican restaurant would be there, and I'd be like pissed, like, I missed the Dominicans. Dang it! Oh, I didn't know it was Monday. Shoot!
Yeah.
So yeah, I saw the light.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you for allowing me to highlight you. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a great chat. I loved having a chat with you. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And to everyone out there, I want you to like so I know it's real. Comment and tell me how you feel. Subscribe to Citadel and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.